Hi, everybody. It's Rabbi David Mark. We had some technical difficulties, but we seem to be okay right now. I went through a desktop and a laptop, and now I'm using my phone, and we'll do the best we can to try and bring you some Torah. That is what we are here for. Now, by this time, everybody has pretty much had it with being stuck inside. But at the same time, we have no place to go. We're not allowed to go anywhere. We only pray for everybody's safety. We're going to dedicate this session for Refuah Shalema, a quick and speedy recovery for everybody who might not be feeling well. And I'm not just talking about the big C. I'm talking about just a sniffle, just a little psychical angst, little Weltschmerz, as they used to call it in philosophy class, world sadness, because I'm sending all this Torah out to you, and Torah is always a positive message. But in terms of forgetting the outside world just for a little bit of time, we want to focus on what D.H. Lawrence called the inscape. The inscape is your interior landscape. It is your heart. It is your soul. It is your brain. Everything that you can possibly think about in terms of what lives up here. And you've been adding to that store of information and knowledge your entire life from the moment you started to look around and see the world. They say that little tiny babies are pretty much into themselves. They aren't even aware that they're thinking. But then they begin to realize that when they cry, when they make noises, loving, caring arms reach out for them. They are changed, they are fed, they are hugged and kissed and loved. And I think you should really get that same kind of attitude when you're discussing God. Regardless of how you term the deity, you must reach out. There has got to be something beyond ourselves. I'm not speaking in terms of logic. Logic just doesn't work when you're trying to prove whether God exists or not. I'm speaking here of a feeling, a passion. We reach out for God, God reaches in for us. Even when we feel that God is ignoring us, even when we feel that we are in such existential and psychical and soul pain, there is no way that any outside being who is inside of us as well could possibly give us any love, any caring. And that is when you want to be thinking about the time, if you have children or nieces or nephews, or even just observing small children out in the world. The mall, which used to be our village square, but nobody knows where it's going to be in the future. This might be our village square. When you see the baby first learning to walk, and I remember when my kids were little, and we had this long, low coffee table, nothing fancy. It was dark wood. I remember it very fondly because my whole life I am in search of horizontal surfaces on which to pile books and stuff and all my business. And you would be sitting there on the couch and you would see one little hand reaching up to the edge of the coffee table, the other little hand reaching up, and then you would see the little face. And the face had this look of discovery and amazement and wonder about itself, as if thinking or saying, "Look at me. There is no other person, being, spirit in the entire universe who has ever done what I have just done," when the baby first learns to walk. And when the baby is walking, or shall we say staggering, at this point you've got one parent behind, one parent in front, just like the very famous Norman Rockwell painting that you probably have seen, where one parent has let the child go and the other parent is going to be the landing pad, where holding out your hands, waiting for the baby to arrive. And the baby is marching along with such a look of delight on her face, and knowing, I am now walking. I am a two-legged creature. Now, don't fool yourself. You know this as well as I, that if they really want to go someplace in a hurry, usually to make trouble, they drop to the ground and they crawl. My goodness, how they can crawl. I'll talk more about that later. But what is the point of watching the baby stagger along? Because the baby knows that she is alone. But there is a parent behind and a parent in front. And this is such an important state of trust for the child, because she realizes, even though Mommy, Daddy are not holding my hand at this time, nonetheless, they are with me, they are watching out for me, they will catch me if I fall. That's how I want you to think about God. God may not be visible in your life at this time. You may feel that God has deserted you, but at the same time, you must understand God is there. All right? That's so important. The other episode I want to tell you about is where the idea of pain, the idea of a certain degree of what we call in Judaism, Yisurei shel Ahava. These are pangs of love. These are chastisements, punishments of love. And that is such a horrible expression. It sounds better in Hebrew, frankly. But what it means is this. If, God forbid, something happens to a person, something bad, let's say not life-threatening, God knows, we have enough of that stuff around us these days. But think about the time where the baby, as I said, as before, is walking, but she is also crawling, and she crawls mighty quickly. And this is a fairly old story because it involves not the uncaring, but let's just say the parent who doesn't really pay attention the way they should, sitting behind a newspaper. And you remember, the Sunday paper is an enormous tablecloth of print. And you look over it every so often to make sure the kid is okay and not in any mortal danger. And then as you look, you notice the child is very far off, and she has somehow secured a fork, a metal fork that conducts electricity. And the baby is crawling top baby speed towards an electrical outlet in the wall. You ask me, well, now, why was that electrical outlet not covered with one of those impossible plastic plugs, which is easy to get in, but you can never get the blessed thing out? And I will tell you, because someone was vacuuming the day before. They pulled out the plug, they pushed in the vacuum cleaner. Later on, they pulled out the vacuum cleaner, but forgot to put in the plug. And that is what the baby has her little beady eye on. They're not beady eyes, they're adorable big eyes you could swim in. And you leap up and you throw down your newspaper and you're on your way charging at the wall, and the baby is crawling, and just before the baby reaches up with the fork to stab the electrical outlet and kill herself, you reach the baby, and do you remonstrate? Do you say, give me the fork, baby? Do you say, bad baby, shouldn't have gotten the fork? No, you slap that fork out of the baby's hand as hard and as quickly as you can. Now, what does the baby do? The baby cries. But what do you say? Better you should cry now than I should cry after. See, my mother-in-law should rest in peace. That was her expression, one of several that she laid upon us. So, you see, living is a dangerous thing indeed. What we're doing now, as I said before, is we're burrowing within. And we're going to learn a little bit of Torah from Rebbe Nachman of Bratslav. Do you know the Bratslaver? The Bratslaver, of course, lived in the early 1800s. He didn't live very long. I think he was about 38 when he passed away. But he left us a great deal of wisdom. Now, most of the Hasidic Rebbes did not leave books. And the reason for that, the story, which I will tell you, is about the Baal Shem Tov, who got the whole thing going. He was the founder of Hasidism, Hasidut. And one day the Baal Shem Tov was giving a drash. He was giving a Devar Torah, a Torah lecture. And one of his students was sitting in the back, taking down notes furiously. And the Rebbe was not happy, but he wasn't going to insult the student, the Talmud, and he went on with his drash. And afterwards, he asked the Talmud, could you please come up here? And the Talmud said, Rebbe, he says, Rebbe, I'm writing down all your wise sayings. I'm going to make you famous, Rebbe. Isn't that wonderful? And the Rebbe said, let me see. And he read very quickly, and he put down the book, and he smiled sadly at the Talmud, and he said, listen to me. I said one thing, you heard a second thing, and you wrote down a third thing. You see, the approach of the Rebbes was to have oral knowledge, because they believed that when you run their information through the prism of your brain, you're not necessarily going to get the entire thing. You'll get a little tiny, tiny drop of what they're trying to communicate. It's the same thing with my Gemara Rebbe, my freshman year at yeshiva. I would take notes furiously. The truth is, I didn't enjoy Talmud. I had no reasoning to believe Talmud was a logical study or anything worthwhile, even though it is considered the queen of Jewish studies. And I was taking notes, and every time the rabbi would speak, I would write it down. And finally he said, "Mark, come up here." And I went up there, and he said, "You know, Mark, you're so busy taking down what I'm saying. You're not listening to what I'm saying." So I tried. Honestly, I tried, but it didn't really work. So I just went back to taking notes. And I've done that sort of thing ever since. And thank God, I think I've done okay in school, but that's not important. Now, according to the Baal Shem Tov, and this is the Baal Shem Tov being filtered through the Bratslaver, he said, we are taught, mitzvah goreret mitzvah, schar mitzvah od mitzvah. What does that mean? One mitzvah leads to another, one mitzvah causes another, and the reward for doing a mitzvah is another mitzvah. There's so many mitzvot, my goodness. You can sit in your house and think and do mitzvot. I mean, the best kinds of mitzvot are obviously mitzvot aseh, that is positive mitzvot of doing, because doing rather than thinking is the essence of Judaism. That doesn't mean, well, Judaism, there's a lot of Judaism which is illogical. I mean, I've got my little yummy bummy here. There's nothing logical about that. I can tell you that we wear the yarmulke to be aware that someone is over us. That's one explanation. Another explanation is that in the days of the Greeks and the Romans, a servant, and I always think about Zero Mostel when a funny thing happened on the way to the forum, that we're aware that we are servants of God when we wear the yarmulke. You see? It's very similar to when a minister or a priest wears a collar, what they call the Roman collar or the dog collar. I heard a Methodist refer to it that way. And that shows they are servants of God. They are wearing the yoke of Christ, Y-O-K-E. Similarly, when we wear the yarmulke, we are servants of God. Same idea, different symbol. And is that a mitzvah? Well, I suppose in our time it has kind of concretized into a mitzvah, even though it's a minhag. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses never wore a yarmulke. Aaron had that big cap with the golden plate over his forehead and so on. But the yarmulke doesn't really come into Jewish history until around the Middle Ages. A lot of things happen in the Middle Ages, mostly bad things. Okay, now what is the point of doing a mitzvah? If you do the mitzvah happily, joyfully, that's on a very high madrega. That's a very high madrega ruchanit, a spiritual level. If you do the mitzvah grudgingly, or slowly, or you're late for the minyan, which was my character note when I was in yeshiva, or even when I went to my neighborhood shul, I would arrive fashionably late. My old man would wake me up, "David, shul's starting at 9 o'clock. You be there no later than 9:30. And that's what I did. That's exactly what I did. Put on my Nehru jacket, put on my Carnaby Street jacket, and I was on my way. You do get credit for doing the mitzvah, regardless of the frame of mind in which you do it. You do get credit for doing the mitzvah. And there are all different kinds of mitzvot. Nowadays, my goodness, well, I guess that the highest level of mitzvah would be pikuach nefesh, when one is in danger, God forbid, of losing their life. This is the situation in which we find ourselves now. But let's take a look here. Okay, the reward that God gives